Well, the thing that I found difficult to express is that I wanted to say all effort is unnecessary effort. And I think when people hear that, they think, oh, you shouldn't strive for your goals, or you shouldn't like try hard, or you shouldn't like get into this cool flow state when you're like really engaged with something, or that you shouldn't solve your problems or something. But what I mean is that when you are in the psychological state of efforting, there is something going wrong there. There is that is a way of thinking which isn't actually conducive to learning or action or like feeling or like being alive.
Mhm. So you said the phrase, all effort is unnecessary effort. So effort by definition is unnecessary effort.
I mean, it could be that I'm just sort of like wordsmithing, but I think what I actually want to say is that there is this type of thing that we experience as effort, which is unnecessary, and I think most people do think it is necessary.
Hmm. So what's an example that comes to mind?
If you are like working hard to solve some problem, like anytime when there's a sort of like working hard, or there's a narrowing or a scrunching or a
Hmm.
tunnel vision, that kind of thing,
Hmm.
compared with if you're letting the back of your mind work on it. There was a story between two geneticists, and one of them asked the other one, what is the, I think it was something like, what is the algorithm by which flowers pass on a particular gene? And they were playing a game of tennis. And he said, let me think about that. And so, or maybe it was eye color. I think it was like, how do you determine if you've got a blue-eyed parent and a brown-eyed parent? How do you determine what their child is? And so they played this game of tennis, and then when the tennis game was done, he had the answer. And so he didn't
Hmm.
have to think of it kind of consciously, he didn't have to put effort into it. It was just kind of ticking away at the back of his mind. And I think that it is possible to get into that state at all times. It might not be easy
Hmm.
to get into it at all times, but I think that that's a more effective way of thinking than completely like tunnel visioning into
Hmm.
whatever the problem is.
Hmm. In that state, I'm imagining there's some sort of intention or some sort of loosely held direction or aim of like I wish to discover an answer to this question. And then what happens? Do you let go of that and then focus on the game and trust that the answer will spontaneously arise throughout the as you let your mind wander?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that I don't think there's a guarantee that your mind will create the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Letting go, it depends if you're shifting into this more narrow way of thinking or not. Like I'm sure that that can happen. Like I don't know, if you completely let go of the intention, then you no longer have the intention. But I think in general, so long as you still have that intention, your mind figures it out.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Your mind still figures it out. And that's a more open way of being. In some sense, then the answer will it may feel like it will strike you. It will spark. It will arrive in a flash of inspiration. I guess what I'm wondering is in this method you're describing, which maybe we'll go into more, there's an unexpectedness that you're almost expecting by default because you're sort of letting go of any sort of narrowing or control. You're trusting that an unexpectedness will arise at some moment in time.
Yeah, or that it could. I think it's shifting from I know how to solve this problem. I'm going to use my existing knowledge to solve this problem to, oh, what else is there to the unknown. And it's
Mm.
both in how you're approaching it and then also what the answer might be. I
So
feel
how,
like we're getting a little bit abstract. So I
a
kind
little,
of
yeah, yeah. I'm curious, like, how has this played out for you? Where have you seen this in your own life or experimented with it for yourself?
the place that I experience it most is that I'm in training for the Alexander technique, and this is a way of getting into that free state in a physical activity way.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of like micro things. Like you would think that sitting and standing would be a simple process, but actually no. Like people are this so there's this mode that people get into when they're trying to get to the goal and they're sort of leaving where they are now in order to get to the goal.
Mm.
And when you and so in sitting and standing, we see this. We see that like you're kind of like tensing your muscles in a way that can't possibly get you off the chair, but that and you're kind of thinking, I'm already standing. And whereas if you are with yourself throughout the entire process, then you're more balanced and everything works better. And I think this applies to the mental world as well. It's not also, I don't know if there's a difference between mental and physical because we have sense perception and it gets
Mm.
complicated.
So just trying to deconstruct that, I'm sitting and there's a part of me that's ready to get up, ready to go do the thing. And how I'm understanding it is that readiness mentally might be like, okay, I'm about to do something, or I'm seeing the future projection of me getting up. And physically, you're saying the body enters, like, prepares you to get up. It might like activate the muscles that you would need to stand. I'm picturing a little bit like the guy on the starting blocks of a race that's ready to do this explosive movement at the, at the start of the race for the 100-meter sprint, but is not yet moving. And yet there's a preparedness to make an explosive action. Is that in the ballpark of what you're describing?
If it were just that, that would be completely fine. And actually, you want to have that sort of readiness at all times. Like, I don't want to be kind of glued to, like, if I couldn't, like, if I look around and, oh my God, the remote is so far away, like, and then I have to put effort into, then that's not a nice way of living. Where if it's like, oh, the remote is easy to get,
Mm.
that's fine. The thing that actually happens is that people, it's like they organize themselves as if they are already at that place or as if they so like typically what happens with sitting is that a bunch of muscles tense up that are completely unnecessary for
Mm.
standing, but because they are kind of thinking of it as they are already up.
Mm.
And I think this applies to uh like when you are doing this task in order to have done it instead of enjoying the process.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. The thing I want to get off my brain as you were speaking was this idea of living in the future. That's what I'm hearing in this. Is there any relation to that concept?
Yeah, it's living either in a time that you're not or in a place that you're not.
Mm. Mm. Okay, maybe we'll come back to that. But you were talking about this idea of doing a task for the purpose of it being done. I have that like, okay, I have to go do taxes. And so I'm not looking forward to the doing of the taxes. I'm just like motivated by the getting it done, achievement, accomplishment feeling. And you're saying that plays a role in this process. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it creates that kind of friction. Do you when you're doing the taxes, does it feel the same as like right before you do them? Or does it kind of feel okay at the moment of engaging with it? I'm curious.
Probably it feels okay 5 minutes after the moment of engaging it.
Yeah.
Uh, I've seen that play out for me, the like 5 minute rule of I just need to get in it. and then it gets easier. But those first 5 minutes, and then the 20 minutes before the 5 minutes where I'm like dreading to do the thing, ends up being the hardest part.
Yeah, so it's interesting that when you're actually with the thing, it's not so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's the imagining about doing the thing, projecting how the thing is going to feel, dreading, resisting. That that sounds to me like the bucket of unnecessary effort.
Yes, and it can happen while you're doing it. So I remember when I
Mm.
first noticed this, I was doing some web design work and I was not enjoying the work and I didn't really want to be doing it. I wanted to have the website done.
Mm.
And for as long as I was thinking, I just want this website to exist, then that was making everything feel bad and hard and like I was sort of constantly in this tension.
Mm. Mm. Okay, so if we had to zoom out and kind of like encapsulate this chapter of things, what have we covered so far in in your mind?
We've we've at least so we've covered that the mind can do things without having to consciously direct it to. Like I don't have to plan this sentence for me to speak. And that the mind can work on things in the background and that the mind can work on things while other bits of the mind are doing something else.
What do you mean by that last part?
Uh, I can I can be aware of the room that I'm in and not like cut off information coming from like
Mm.
maybe someone walks in while I'm still talking to you.
Mm.
And I can be engaged in the act of speaking while I'm tracking other things at once.
Ah, I see. I see.
Instead of having a tunnel vision, like I must focus on Michael in order to get my
Mm.
points across, and this feels uncomfortable for me and probably uncomfortable for you.
Mm. Mm. Okay, so that's great groundwork established. Um, where do you think there's nuance to this, or where do you think there's a perspective of this that you're, yeah, more tuned into or excited to dive into?
One kind of open question for me is what is this thing that it seems like there are two kind of different modes of the brain. One of them is more like focused implementation or acting on known things, and it has a sort of narrowness to it, which can be useful if you are doing some kind of narrow task. And then there's this other, which is the receptive to new information, creative.
Mm.
For some reason, physical space seems related to it. Like if you're really focused on something and you're not really paying attention to the outside
Right.
world, you're also not getting information from the outside world, and it feels different.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And then my open question about it is why? How?
Why? Right. Right.
Like
Right.
what other things? Like is it this Ian McGilchrist like two hemispheres? Is it like just a different system of thinking? Is it some other science that we don't have yet? I, maybe this is too much of an open question for the scope of this, but I
Yeah,
always
I certainly don't know any science. So I and once you go in that direction, I'll start to get a little bit lost. I think most people, not most people, some people care about the science. Most people, I think, care about, so which should I do and how should I be and what's the proper form of living, or at least I represent that side. And
yeah.
I'm curious where this will land for you because I read a lot of like uh, authors who speak about awareness and who I have this belief that they embody awareness. So they speak from a place of embodiment and not from intellectual. I speak a lot from intellectual awareness of like, I think I know. But like an author like Krishnamurti, for example, or an author like Anthony DeMello, they might, they to me seem like they go all in on this one side of the brain, the open awareness side of the brain. And one of my favorite sort of definitions of enlightenment, uh, some teacher was asked, what's one thing? How can you explain enlightenment in one sentence? And he said, I don't mind what happens, meaning a complete okayness with all, complete sort of like, um, the what I understand from them is there is no focused control because there's no real desired outcome. There's no one scenario is better than the other. And so all outcomes are equally as pleasant or unpleasant for them. There's no such thing as pleasant and unpleasant in that sort of idea of like there's an okayness with both. And so what I'm wondering is, for yourself even, are you attracted to that ideal? Does that ideal appeal to you of fully living in this awareness where it's kind of like you're almost watching the movie of life happen, but you're just totally okay and embracing of all of it? Or do you feel that life is more going from pole to pole and knowing when to exert effort and focus and narrow in and knowing when to expand out and being more in the dynamics of the two sides?
Yeah, I would say much closer to the second one, maybe somewhat in between. I don't know, when you were talking, I was like, I want to die. Like this is it sounds so vague and like mushy and
Oh,
um
interesting.
the way that I think about that thing is that actually there's a story that my Alexander technique teaches about Eckhart Tolle, who said that Eckhart Tolle discovered bliss, and then what did he do? He sat on a park bench for 2 years, sort of in bliss, in the power of now. And my teacher said, "What is it for? What is it for?" And so what the thing that I love about this approach, this Alexander technique inspired approach, is that you have the spaciousness, you have the ability to change direction, change your mind, and yet you can still have absolutely sharp intentions.
Mm,
And there are still things that you want, there are still things that you're going to. And it might be that you find that as you're going there, maybe something else is better. Or it might be that as you're going there, the route of going there is actually not the route that you want and you take a side route. But this thing of like meditators come to our class and they have the space. They are this sort of spacious awareness thing, but there's a kind of a vagueness. There's a kind of a like, okay, but where are you going? What are you doing?
mm. So there is purpose and agency and desired outcomes. Um, there is, yeah, agency comes to mind. It's not a paper bag in the wind. It's, I want to, not necessarily I want to end up at the destination, but I want to have some levers of control over my journey.
Levers of control over my journey. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say it's something more like knowing that whenever you choose a destination, you have incomplete knowledge. You don't perfectly know how to get there. You don't perfectly know whether it's the best thing. And so what I want is to have something I'm aiming at, but also be available to new information, new choices along the way. Because
Mm,
if you know what you're aiming at and you know how to get there, then all of this life until you get it is not really life. You are just following some algorithm.
mm, mm. Well, yeah, I'm particularly allergic to like, yeah, to the follow this framework or repeat this drill 50 times or like do the thing without thinking, without any magic, almost just follow the prescription in service of getting somewhere. It's almost like the surprise of what can I learn and what unexpected, spontaneous surprises can I go along the way. That seems to be the lifeblood.
You're also a big proponent of reps. I'm curious how those two interact.
Yeah, Tristan's a big proponent of reps.
Ah.
I'm a big, I'm not a, it's not that I'm a not a proponent of it. And in fact, I've been taking jujitsu for the past 3 months. And one of the biggest motivators for me is to sort of instill in myself an understanding of like, there's for many skills, there's almost no way to shortcut it. Like there's no mental tricks that I can do. You know, if I embody effortless awareness and I remember to slow down, you know, there's nothing I can do to become a blue belt except put in 100 hours of these complex scenarios where I'm figuring things out. I think where my sensitivity really comes in is what those reps look like. Chess is a really good example. I love to play chess against other people online, and that's the only thing I do. Whereas a better learner, a faster learner, a smarter learner will do tactics. You know, they'll work on puzzles. They'll look at a position for 10 minutes and they'll analyze it. Or they'll go on YouTube and they'll study an opening, memorize it, and then play it 10 times against 10 different opponents. Or they'll just drill it on their own. All of what I'm describing there sucks the fun, the play out of chess. And so most skills that I've acquired, I'm going a little off topic, but most skills I've acquired, like freestyle rapping or playing chess or dancing or speaking or coaching, has been me doing the thing fully. And then just through that cycle of doing the thing as if it were the real thing from the get-go, I've increased my skill level, but it's taken me probably 10 times longer than a more, you know, a nuanced learner who attacks it from a more strategic level. So I think the reps are like, you have to do the thing, but then what those reps look like, I think, is different for different people. And I'm just like very allergic to repetitive, isolated reps that don't make me feel like I'm actually engaging in the full thing.
Yeah. I have a thread on Twitter called "Practice is Bullshit," and
Ooh,
this is the entire idea. It's that I want to put something into practice, and so I want to do the real thing instead of
yes.
thinking that doing a repetitive thing will get me anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's my MO as well. Why did we get on reps? Do you remember?
You're talking about martial arts.
Yeah, you asked me. That's funny because I'm a proponent of reps, but I don't remember the other thing I was saying. Interesting. Um, could we backpedal on the last thread we were talking about if it somehow sparks into memory? So we are talking about Eckhart Tolle on the bench. What's the
Yeah.
point
Ah,
of it
yes.
all? There is a part of life, engaging with life, is to have aims. It's to have intentions and simultaneously be able to have the open awareness of, if I set out to go to the North Pole, but suddenly the winds are taking me east, and I didn't expect that. It's to have the awareness to either make a different decision, go with the winds, question my intention, and say maybe it's better to go to Mongolia. Like there's some interplay between purpose and objective and goals, and then sort of like ease and choice, and more being kind of like going with the flow.
Yeah, people talk about flow being where the difficulty of the task sort of meets your skill level. But I think the thing that's actually special about getting into flow is that you are learning, are engaging in some creative process. And then when something is too hard, then basically that's getting scuppered. And then when something
Hmm.
is too easy, then you're not actually like alive to the information.
I'm curious how this plays out for you. We talked about a lot of sort of heady themes, although they're not heady at all. But for somebody that's not in it right now, these can feel a little out of reach. What is this? How does life change for you, or how has it changed for you the more you've explored these ideas for yourself?
One thing is a radical reduction in the inner critic, like or overthinking. Like there are these two kind of bad modes. There's getting kind of frozen up or like effortfully doing something, or there's this reactive like, oh my God, I just did this thing and that's bad, or like, oh my God, there's this situation and you're kind of like jumpy.
Mm.
And I find that, yeah, the practice that I'm in allows me to engage in all of the activities I'm doing with a kind of like peaceful, curious, not being thrown around nor like fixing myself to something, just sort of being with it.
So what changes in your mind or your understanding of mental patterns? I'm imagining Lulie 5 years ago, 10 years ago, makes these um, conditioned reactions to things. And Lulie of today uh, has found a way to shift that or notice it and choose something else. What are those subtle changes that you find yourself doing?
If I take the example of ultra speaking, it's such a perfect example because it's I first did the fundamentals level one 4 years ago, which was before I did any of this Alexander technique stuff, and then I did it again recently. Before, first of all, there was a kind of goal-orientedness to it, but not in a necessarily fully um, productive way, because I thought, okay, well, I want to get better at speaking so that I don't feel terrible when I'm filming YouTube videos,
Mm,
and there was a kind of goal, and I can't film my YouTube videos until I'm doing this, but I should probably do that, and there was a sort of fight there. So that was the kind of more macro thing. And then more
yeah.
micro thing is that like when I'm doing it, before I would be thinking a lot more about, oh, how did that go? Oh, what is the problem? Like there was a sort
Mm,
of a like I need to get better at this, and so I need to
mm-hmm,
keep checking. And I know
mm,
that ultra speaking has a ton of things that kind of take that away. And I found that it was harder for me to notice when I was getting into that state. It was almost like the Alexander technique stuff put everything in slow motion so that I could catch these thoughts live, and so a thought would come up and I'm like, oh, just recover, and then I would continue. Whereas
mm,
before it would be much more of a runaway train.
mm,
Or I'd be
mm,
thinking about it afterwards and I'd be thinking like, oh, did people think that was, how did people receive it, whatever. Whereas now I can be like, cool, thanks for the feedback. And then instead of using that as a way to get myself somewhere,
mm,
I can use it as a, oh, this is a fun thing to try next. Because I'm less in the past. I'm less like thinking, oh, that was, such a bad rep and whatever, because I can't do anything about the rep happened.
mm,
And so instead it's like, oh, what is my new intention for the next one?
mm, mm. So you're less in the past about here's what I did and oh no, how did this come across? And oh, how could I be so, careless and all these things. I also picked up you're less in the future because you're not going, I need to learn this thing because I need this skill so that I can unlock YouTube. And without it, I'm in, it's so um, there's this clearing away of what seems to me like storylines.
Hmm. Storylines.
Yeah, like we see this in ultra speaking a lot. Like some students they'll do reps, and every rep is a storyline about who they are. I always do this. Or if they fail, here's another one where I didn't succeed. Or like it's every rep is a reinforces a storyline of it's not just Krishnamurti talks about this. It's like there's the fact, and then there's the um, observations about the fact. So he's saying like there's the problem or the fact, and then what we do to turn the fact into the problem, which is like, I always do this, or man, it's still not working, or how long is this going to take? And it's all this narrative, these storylines about the processing of what just happened.
Absolutely. And that's a byproduct of not thinking about the past or the future and instead being where I am now. And what you said actually made me suddenly understand something that my teacher has been telling me for the past 3 or 4 years that I've never understood until now, which is that he says that he teaches people. So people try to be somewhere that they're not, like when you're trying to stand,
Mm,
or some when that they're not.
mm,
So that future thing, or someone that they're not. And as you were talking, I was thinking back to the ultra speaking reps, and there's a third thing. So there's the past and the future fixation, but there's also if I am presently either judging myself or kind of trying to be a performative speaker,
mm,
then I'm leaving myself in another way.
mm,
And
mm,
so it really felt like, oh, I can let my belly out. I can be where
mm.
I am now and whatever is actually there.
Yeah, it's interesting because it reminds me of a person I'm working with, and I introduced them to the concept of reliving moments. And their first rep, they couldn't do it. They couldn't relive into the moment. And so the the fact that they couldn't do it on their first rep brought them a lot of pain, brought them a lot of disappointment. They started saying things like, "Oh, this is I really need to work on this," or yeah, this one is hard for me. It's going to take a while. And in like a week or two of practice, they became some of the, one of the best examples of reliving moments. But it's interesting that like part of what you're describing of somebody I'm not or someone I'm not is whenever we see these high performing type A individuals who have a track record of success in almost everything they do, they come into ultra speaking and they struggle in their first few reps. Suddenly, this disconnect happens in their identity, which is like, I'm usually really good at this and at things in general. And here I am, really not being able to get it right. And that causes them a lot of pain. I'm bringing this up because there's something about this identity. Um, I've been thinking a lot about learner's mindset. What is truly a great learner? And it's this idea of like some really high achievers are quite impatient with their learning process. And I find they have unnecessary self-criticism or self-judgment or dissatisfaction where instead of having a more curious, playful, like, oh, that didn't work. Oh, that's so interesting. Like, oh man, can we try that again? Or like Tristan's really good at this of like, wow, okay, so that didn't work. Let me deconstruct it. Instead, most people are like, like there's this almost like in their facial expressions, there's like a self-lashing almost of like, like, it didn't work. And I wonder if that doesn't have to do with identity, with like, I'm the type of person that usually succeeds and is successful. So to see myself struggling and quote unquote failing is so painful to me to witness that I'm going to sort of like whip myself until I'm able to perform the right behavior.
Oh, geez, my coffee machine just went on. I don't know if it's being picked up by the mic.
No. It's totally invisible to my ears.
It's strange that through doing this practice, I have been doing that kind of thing less. And I'm kind of thinking, how come? Like, what is it about being in the here and now that also loosens that identity quality?
Well, I don't want to take us too off topic, so tell me if I am, but in this last quarter, the theme I've been exploring a lot for myself is conditioning. Conditioning, like just mental responses to things that probably have been there for since childhood. And I lose a chess game. My instant conditioning is I have this feeling in my body, this sensation of like, if I blundered or if I got beat. But then there's a mental component where I might say something to myself like, well, I deserve that. Or, well, that's what you get for not being fully present and switching apps while playing, or like, there'd be certain things that would just happen as a result, probably because growing up, like my parents or my dad, my grandpa modeled like, hey, take your time, think through the moves, don't make unforced errors. So in tennis is a great example where you'll see an athlete like literally punish themselves, slam their rackets, like they'll literally, the self-talk if they're making a lot of errors is so strong. So I've been exploring this concept of conditioning, and the reason that I'm so attracted by jujitsu right now is because for the first time in my life, I'm going into a skill with a completely different mindset, which is like, there's no end goal, there's no timeline, there's no expectation of myself. There's only a true curiosity around, how will I learn this thing? And my current mental model is, I don't even think my brain helps me in this. Like, there's no point in me focusing and trying to figure something out. I really think it's like a sponge mentality where if I just come to 100 classes, my body will soak up instincts and I'll start to do the right thing sometime. But for those 100 reps, what I'm keenly curious about is like, hey, every time something doesn't work, how am I interfacing with that? How am I relating to difficulty and failure and embarrassment and being bad at something? And so I have this lens of really being aware of my learning, being aware of my conditioned learning styles, and seeing if they're serving me. And so you asked, like, why is it that we aren't so out there when we're present? And I really don't know if that's what it is for me. It might be, but for me, it's more my understanding of learning has changed to the point where if I'm going to undertake an activity, I have to remind myself of the intentions of, here's my expectation of myself. If I fail, here's how I'm going to look at it. Here's how I want myself to look at it. And everything changes to where it's less about the skill acquisition, which is what most people care about. I want to get better at jujitsu. I want to get better at speaking. And more of like, over these next 30 days, how much can I learn about myself, my conditioned patterns, and how can I use every moment, success or failure, to reflect to myself, hey, this is how you are in these scenarios.
This is 100% what I'm currently doing with ultra speaking. It was very
Uh,
lovely to hear reflected.
wow. Okay. Tell me more. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
I don't know. People have asked like, "Oh, are you going to go into coaching?" And I say, oh, I don't. I'm much more with the each thing that I'm
Mm,
doing and using each rep to kind of notice like, "Oh, there's that thing in me." Or like, "Oh, this is
mm,
this idea that I feel like I struggle to express," or like, "Oh, I find it difficult to go into this kind of energy state."
yeah. Yeah. So you're what we inside the company call a super fan. You're a super fan, and
I
it's
think people outside the company would
yeah,
also say that.
and it's lovely. It's like the best feeling to see somebody so engaged with it. And what I'm recognizing is part of the reason you're a super fan, or a big part of your relationship to ultra speaking, is that you seem to get out of it more than almost everybody else. And not just out of the program, but literally you are able to squeeze out of every interaction with it more than most people. You come in with such a curiosity, and there's so much that you're able to draw from a single rep, whereas most people would be like, oh, that worked, or that didn't work, or oh, that sucked, or that was good. There's like a wider landscape or a wider surface area of what you can get out of any single interaction with the games or with the exercises.
This slightly clashes with my experience of the other people who, to me, also seem to make quick progress. I could imagine some percentage more, but that's interesting. I feel like, oh, that was unexpected. Just like in ultra speaking, unexpected feedback. Like, oh, am I doing this
Mm,
different? Yeah.
mm,
I
mm-hmm,
I had a question about the martial arts that you were talking about.
mm-hmm.
Um, how much do you use the pause or the breath when you're learning there, if
Mm.
at all?
Um, well, the first instinct that happens to most people is to everyone, is they will use too much energy. So it's the perfect theme. They'll use unnecessary effort. Um, a lot of it comes from conditioning, and a lot of it comes from protective mechanisms. So you're in fight or flight. You might be on the ground. Somebody might have their hands on your collars here, and so instinctively you might put your hands on their collars, and you might grip really tightly, even though that tightness of the grip isn't actually helping you. Similarly, you might be in that position where you're sort of clenched and defending yourself, and your breathing might be really, really fast, and so a few months into it, you might get reminded over and over again of like, hey, even in this position, relax. Nothing's happening yet. Like you're still okay. And so I think in the first 3 months, I have to learn the feeling of safety in vulnerable and compromised positions, because prior to learning it, I feel like every one of those positions was, a split second away from full submission, which is like, let's equate that to ultimate death in public speaking, like ultimate embarrassment. So that feeling of like, I am one word or one movement or 1 second away from worst case scenario puts me on edge. So I tighten, my breathing gets really elevated, and I'm essentially on the highest threat alert. And in jujitsu and in speaking, a lot of the process is learning like, no, 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 you're okay. You're okay. Like there's ways to be in this position where you don't have to try so hard. Um, and I'll finish with how higher belts, blue belt, purple belt, they're much more comfortable with this idea of camping. Camping, you get on top of somebody and you just camp, you just wait. You wait for the bottom player to tire themselves out. So they know that the weaker belts, the newer students, use so much unnecessary effort that there's the higher belt strategy is let me just wait it out. You know, why engage in these first 3 minutes when I know by minute 4 they're going to be so tired that anything I want to do will be so much easier because they just don't have the strength anymore. So that's where the pause comes in jujitsu, is just remembering that like your instincts are going to tighten and tense and the breathing is going to speed up. So how can you find more safety and relaxation even in compromised positions?
I imagine that we don't have that much time left. I did want to draw a parallel between performativity in speaking. I think you can also be performative in a certain energetic way in martial arts. Like if you're, pushing through in order to, and there's a sort of a, I don't know, like macho or kind of a thing where you are putting more effort, but and it doesn't work
Mm,
quite as well, but maybe it works better than just getting like anxious.
right. Like Tristan got the feedback early on that he's super athletic and very strong, which is great feedback. But his instructor would tell him like that's going to work against you because
Mm.
you're going to rely on that for the next 6 months and it'll get you out of those tricky situations against the lower belts. And then one day you're going to realize, there's someone more skilled on whom that's not going to work because they're technically much better. And you're going to now you have to relearn the technique portion of this. So you're relying on the wrong things. Um, but I think the concept of performative is really interesting because it's to me it's like again it's like if I go into jujitsu and I grapple with somebody, if my goal is to win, then I might rely on bad habits. I might use unnecessary strength. I might feel really disappointed when I lose, inevitably. If my goal is to learn or see myself in different situations and see how I respond and regard and be joyful of like, wow, I learned something about myself, I will approach it very differently. And in speaking, I think this idea of performative, especially in practice, comes from this idea of like, hey, right now you're trying to achieve something in this idea of like, uh, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And you're trying to do it the right way. So you have this objective, but it's narrowing your choices. Whereas a less performative, more expressive person would experiment more. They try silly things. They break the rules and make things messy and put themselves in ridiculous situations and uh, would just experiment more, be more willing to experiment. And so as a result, I think they would learn more because they would discover more. They take more unexpected turns than the performative person.
So I think we can say all performative effort is unnecessary. And this solves the problem that I had in the beginning of the call.
Can I sit with that for a second? I have a few more minutes if you do,
Yeah,
by the way. All performative energy is unnecessary.
effort.
All performative effort is unnecessary. Yeah, it's I'm wondering how to apply that idea. Intuitively, I would, shy away from anything that has the word performative in it. But I wonder how to reconcile that with um, with the podcast, you know, with going on a stage, with being on the podcast, with leading the seminar, with being in the high stakes meeting that could win the business. In all these scenarios where it's no longer about learning and experimentation,
Mm.
you're not there for deliberate practice. You're there for this is now the real thing in a sense. How do you approach something like that?
Well, my first thought is if everything is all planned in advance anyway, it doesn't really matter because you're not making new choices.
What do you mean everything's
Um,
all planned in advance?
well, if you've got a meticulously planned speech or you're doing something where the performativity is
No. Let's get rid of that. It's more like
uh,
you have uh you know a client wants you to lead a session on the Alexander technique for them, and the client is like a, I don't know, someone you really admire. It's a person with 1 million followers. It could really, if you really want them to have a good experience, you're invested in that outcome a little bit more. Or you're going on a podcast to talk about Alexander technique, but it's not the Michael Gendler podcast. It's the Chris Williamson podcast. And you know that it's all going to be, this is like millions of views. So it's not that you're hyper prepared or meticulously scripted. It's just that the feeling of importance for this thing seems to go up. And for sure, this is not a rep for you to just like get it all messy and fail, but enjoy the process. This is one where a part of you is like, no, I really want to do a good job.
performativity would harm that, I think. What you're describing is more like having a different intention, where part of the intention is, wow, this is an important thing. I want to make sure to hit these points, or I want this kind of approach to it. But if you're thinking, I need to make myself look good,
Mm.
that's it's not going to be a fun conversation. There's a slightly there's it's always like there are these two different troughs you can fall into. There's the overperformance, like I'm doing this thing, but there's also the, well, this doesn't really matter, like who cares kind of thing, where you're kind of like where you drop the intention, or the intention is
Uh,
kind of vague or wavers.
Maybe that latter one is more of a defense mechanism.
It can be, or it can be that someone is tired. Um, like sometimes having a sharp intention, especially if you're not
Uh,
that type of person, doesn't come naturally
I see.
because probably school suppression or something.
I see. I see. So like, for example, it's the end of the workday. I'm tired. I have a dinner with my wife. If I'm if I don't mindfully set an intention, I might just like put that tired energy into my day as if it were me by myself. But then I recognize like, oh, actually, like we're just not going to have a good dinner. This is going to impact her. I may want to be more mindful and therefore remind myself, hey, although you're tired, focus on being present or something like that. And that can help guide a more behavior I want to see in myself and not the natural sort of like if I just let myself run on autopilot.
Yeah. It also makes me think, I watched this YouTube video, I think it was Charlie from Charisma on Command, who went on this like big podcast and kind of thought like, well, I've been doing this for many years. I know what's up. But because I don't know if it was like not having this sharp intention or like
Mm,
what was going on, but he kind of like relaxed a little bit too much in a
mm,
way that had a negative
uh,
effect for the podcast.
right. I would imagine this is for all sports. You have to have a level of alertness and adrenaline to succeed at the highest level.
Yeah.
Sports are a really good analogy, I think, because like you're not out there to just have fun and whatever happens, happens. Like people paid money, you have fans, like you want to give them the best performance possible. Even like if you're a musician, you know, you want to give people the best performance possible, but you have to find a way to also not put that kind of crushing pressure on yourself.
Yeah, it's like you want to be very clear with what you're doing. And sometimes you can think, well, I can just kind of do the activity, but without
Mm-hmm.
paying a particular type of attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of sometimes my Alexander teacher shows people a game of catch. And at first they're like, oh, am I going to catch the ball? And they're kind of like, they're tense and they're kind of like this. And then he says, don't care whether you catch it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Make eye contact and catch the ball and don't care. And so some
Yes.
people from that will then be able to effortlessly catch the ball without
Mm,
even looking at the ball.
mm,
And some
mm.
people interpret it as, ugh, like kind of you're trying to
Ah,
catch it, but you're kind of like, you're not really
that's
trying,
well,
or
that's
like it lands in the
actively
hand
not
and then it falls
caring.
out. Yeah, it's a
There's
different type of not caring.
yeah, there's active not caring, and then there's the the removal of caring. Not the addition of not caring, but the removal of caring, if that makes sense.
I think so, yeah.
Like because you care so much, we have to remove it's what staying in character is to me. A lot of people say staying in character and ultra speaking, there's this inauthenticity to it, like you're trying to fake confidence. And how I try to explain it is like staying in character is not the addition of confidence. You're not adding confident behavior, you're removing unconfident behavior that's not serving you. You're removing the conditioning of apologizing or self-punishing yourself or all these little things that are extra effort. And by removing them, you're left with greater composure, but you're not adding on extra confidence, if that makes sense.
Totally. That would make a great short, by the way.
Ah, well. Uh, can you take us home? Can you, and maybe we could work together. Can we put a nice bow on it? How do we tie this back to make it full circle?
Effort, this unnecessary effort is being performative or putting more into something that is actually needed. You can also think of it as leaving yourself or leaving the current actions you can do, or uh, leaving the current like place that you are, like thinking, oh, when I'm on holiday, then things will be good, and you're kind of dissociating.
Mm, mm. Uh, One thought, I just want to get this out there because it popped a little while ago and I just remembered it. One way people are performative or they put on more effort than needed, that I used to do myself as well, so I'm intimately familiar with it, is in social situation and on like in interviews or networking events. It's the difference between like the way that I am now, or if I knew that this was like I wanted to make a good impression, I might be a little bit more like this, because I want to be a smiley person and I'm happy. And it's like, yeah. And so you see people who have these almost like forced expressions, and it's really subtle, but it's because they're saying, I want to come across and embody my most optimistic self or a happy self or a nice self. They're incredibly nice, but there's this sense of like leaving behind real parts of you that are not nice and not happy. And so what I've noticed in finding a lot more relaxation in social events is I have come to bring more of my home energy to the mix, like my at home energy, where I'm just like a little bit more like, I guess, unimpressive because I'm not so any one thing, but I'm more okay with being even keel or even, you'll even hear it in conversation like, hey, how's it going? Oh, good. It's good to see you. It's like, that's not how it's like. So I'm not trying to be a downer of like, hey, how's it going? but being mindful of like all these little extra tokens of effort we put in to be just a little bit more energetic, a little bit more optimistic than we actually are. And in dropping those little droplets, I find there's a greater sense of okayness with being the way that I am. Um, and I find myself just, I attract different kinds of people as a result, people who are more resonant of that energy than of the one I was formerly putting out.
It occurred to me that not only is the "Hey, how you doing?" Kind of pushing away those other parts of you, it also kind of assumes that they are a big deal. Like it kind of assumes like, oh, if someone sees that I'm a bit
Mm,
grumpy, then no one will like me.
yes.
Which also again reminds me of ultra speaking that the things that you think you're coming across actually don't come
Uh,
across that way. And if anything, like, hey, like I'm so happy. Do you like me? Like this
yeah,
is not an attractive energy.
yeah, yeah. And so really the whole journey of ultra speaking ultimately is how do you make people aware of that? That's where coach training comes in. That's really the heart of our coach training. Um, but it's really hard to give somebody that feedback, uh, both as a peer and as an instructor of like, hey, do you know you come across as like inauthentic in these ways, or you're hiding these parts of yourselves? Um, but that to me is the heart of ultra speaking because everything else is just like acquiring these skills so that you can come across a certain way when in reality people are just sort of like holding personas or holding these things um, out of a fear of just being seen as they are, uh, impressive and unimpressive, happy and grumpy, and kind of that interplay of being human.
For my first several months of ultra speaking, I was in that performative thing, and I didn't even know that I was doing it because I
Mm,
was like I was improving at the games, but there was a sort of an extra performative layer.
mm,
And I cannot tell you how easy it got when I shifted my intention to just like talk like a normal person, like just be myself,
mm,
just like explore like, hey, this is a situation where like I might not see these people again, or I will just for the course.
mm,
Like, what if I'm actually self-expressed in a way that is in alignment with me?
mm, mm. So
And everything got easier. Yeah.
can you take that idea and extrapolate it now to beyond speaking? What is the parallel there to being?
Everything gets easier when you're not performing or efforting or trying to escape yourself.
Mm,
Because when you've got your whole self, then um, it's like suddenly your sense perception gets greater clarity. You can make new decisions. You can actually be with what's going on for you instead of like trying to like isolate this thing and now you're putting effort into that while you're trying to have a perfectly ordinary conversation and it's
mm,
exhausting.
mm.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
So you can still quote unquote improve yourself. You can still set goals and desire to see changes within yourself. Even if you're, let's say you don't want to be shy, you don't want to be scared of walking around on the street. So you want to learn self-defense, you want to learn confidence. It's what I'm getting understanding is it's okay to want these things. It's okay to pursue these things. How can you pursue them with minimal effort? How can you move forward with in a way that doesn't add unnecessary struggle?
Yeah, I wouldn't say how to pursue things with minimal effort because when people hear that, they think like, don't try so hard in the kind of um
In
oh
this
you
catching the ball of like,
yeah.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
It's more like It's more like getting out of your own way. It's more like noticing that when you are engaging in this thing, what's the easeful way of doing it?
Mm, mm. Yeah, and a lot of uneaseful ways, I think, come from this real I think this real impatience with the shyness, with the feeling scared of being attacked, with the I'm so awkward in social situations. The impatience with that translates into the impatience of the learning process, where you go into your first class and you just can't wait for this thing to be fixed. And so every rep you do, you're not open and playful and in it for the long run. You're just like, ugh, fix this thing. Why isn't it being fixed? And there's like a sense of tightening and narrowing in the learning process.
I think what's happening there is that you're going from this, oh, there's this shyness and I don't like it, to, oh, maybe this thing will solve it and maybe I can. But both of these are this sort of narrow, like the fear is narrowing you into what is going to solve this problem. And so in that state, you can't think, oh, maybe actually introversion has some benefits to it. Maybe
Mm,
this shyness has, maybe there's a third way. Maybe I
mm,
actually don't want to be like a big old extrovert because their lives are would be exhausting.
mm, mm. And it makes me think like how in medit people rely on meditation as the 20 minutes where I'm supposed to practice mindfulness, but maybe a more open mindset would catch opportunities for mindfulness throughout the entire day. Similarly, like it's not the 60-minute class you go to practice confidence. It's like every interaction, there's an opportunity to either be more okay with your introversion or take a small risk. It's not just the betting on this one thing to fix all your problems.
Yeah, and even being okay with your introversion, some people will hear that and be like, okay, then I need to be okay with my
Ah,
introversion and have more self-love.
yeah, yeah.
And what I'm saying is, it's like your approach to jiu-jitsu. It's not like you're not you need to self-improve in order to, win the black belt or whatever. Like that's not the approach as you described it.
Mm,
It's a kind of starting from where you are and like being curious about that. It's like it's putting the
mm-hmm.
awareness on instead of trying to get. And if I say trying to get somewhere, then people will say, "Oh, well, don't you shouldn't you get somewhere?" And I'm like, "Yes, okay, well then you should have
How do
a,
you how do you reconcile this with rapid learning, with rapid change, with people who are like, I know it takes on average 2 years to get a blue belt. I want to get mine in 4 months, in 6 months, or I want to become a confident in 30 days. How do you reconcile that strong desire for fast results?
I think that it's easier to get fast results when you're doing it this way, so long as you have the sharp intention. Because if
So,
anything, you need that, because in order to get fast results, you need to do things in a different way than they are usually done.
ah,
And so you need to be open to new like shortcuts or different ways of doing it. You need to be
ah,
very present each step so that you can
ah,
notice those little things that you can tweak.
interesting. So it's actually the rapid learners who have this mindset of like every rep has so much for me to learn if I'm just open with it, if I don't rush the process, but I'm deeply engaged with it. There's a deep engagement without a deep sort of like expectation of this rep has to solve this thing for me and it has to work by this date. Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, I just want to mention as we close the theme that has been really sticking with me in my life over the last week is from Joe Hudson, the concept of welcoming. I don't know if it relates to this, but I just thought I'd share with you like acceptance for me has always registered as like allowing, but allowing has the connotation of like, don't resist. So it comes from this place of like, you know, you don't want something. So you have to mentally trick yourself into saying, all right, fine, come on in. And he has this analogy of like a parent wouldn't say that to their child. You know, they wouldn't be like, all right, fine, get in the house. They'd be like, you're always welcome here. And there's something that's been really sticking with me, that concept of you know, we talk about deep okayness with things and like letting things be as they are, but there's always been that sense of like settling. You have to settle, like, okay, I guess this is how it's going to be. But this concept of welcoming has such a different connotation of like, no, 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 there's something beautiful in this. Like, no, 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 I want this thing to be the way it is because there's something here for me to learn or experience. And that I guess that could relate to the learning journey of it all, of like we can either settle or accept our mistakes or our sort of wayward paths, or have this deep welcoming of like, no, 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 there's something, I'm glad this happened. There's something for me to learn here, which I think is such a more inspiring mindset for me, at least.
Yeah, that resonates a lot. I'm thinking of my ultra speaking reps. Like at this point, especially with the games that I feel just very, very familiar with, comfortable with, I am excited when some kind of new mistake comes up. Like that is a
Mm,
great
mm,
joy for me. That's like where I want to be.
mm, mm, mm. We'll have to think of some advanced games for you to get some more mistakes in. Cool. I think
Cool.
we can cut it here.
Sounds
Really
good.
appreciate this. This was fun.
This is so much fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.